Hello, 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 and welcome back to Almost 30 Podcast, or if it's your first time, welcome.
Welcome to the show. It's Lindsey Simsick and Krista Williams. We are best friends in real life. This is a place where we get down and dirty. We talk to each other in solo episodes. We catch up with each other, which are our bread and butter. And we also have incredible interviews with people like we have on today. I'm so excited. Mark Groves and Kylie McBeath have joined us today. Their new book, Liberated Love, is out now. And there are very few people on the internets or people that I like kind of follow their work where I'm like, you should write a book.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, finally, Mark Groves, Kylie, writing a book. And it is so good. So I was really happy to be able to talk to both of them. We'll get into it in a moment, but I think you're going to love this one.
Yeah, it was really, really good. I loved that they had the chapter, The Great Disconnect. And in it, it's like the types of people in relationships. And I was like, wow, high achiever, workaholic, gesture performer. I've totally got it. But as someone that is codependent, this has been really, really helpful for me in sort of navigating and creating a life outside of the patterns that I was currently in or that I was in previously.
And I think people get tripped up when they are dating because there is a subconscious belief that all the quote problems that they have potentially could be solved by being in relationship with the right person. And a lot of people will be like, no, I don't believe that. Like, I know it doesn't, but we have like a subconscious, like deep belief that another person is going to be the answer for all the things. And so I really love how they like walk us through, basically through the example of their own relationship, because they were together for a period of time. They went on a break, not knowing whether they were going to get back together, but now know it was like a very purposeful, like sacred pause, as they call it. And now they're in relationship 2.0. But there was a lot of, and they call it liberation through limitation. Like there was a lot of things that needed to be looked at and tended to in that separation, but there was a limited time through which they were going to do it. So sometimes people are like, let's just go on a break and see what happens. It's like if you are in like a co-creative relationship and you care about it, I think having like a limitation on what that break looks like is really important so that you can actually do the work and actually focus and actually look towards potentially rebirthing this relationship.
Yeah, it's like, I just think over communication, clarity is just the biggest thing ever. It's just, it has to be there in relationship. And it's funny, like they took their break and they came back. And since I've been dating, I'll hear friends that are like, yeah, there's this guy, we talked, we stopped talking, we got back. I'm like, I'm looking for like a little bit of drama in my life. I'm like, I kind of want like an off and on situation. Like I haven't had like off on, he's in and out of my life stuff in literally 15 years of my life. And so I'm kind of jealous when people are like, we took a break and then we went back. And not that I'm saying that Mark and Kylie were like drama at all, but there is there's such an aspect to that journey that I'm just like, wow, that's kind of fun. Like to be in the process with someone of like, you never know, you never know if it's going to work, if it's going to happen, if they're going to step into this. But since I've been dating, I've been on the TikTok dating algorithm is insane. Like the things that you hear and see as advice on TikTok dating are out of this world. There was one that was like about some string theory. Have you heard of it?
I feel like I've heard about it, but I actually don't exactly know what it means.
I'm also like, okay, this is also not. So basically, I think TikTok is confusing what string theory is and what it actually is. So string theory is like an actual physics theory. Like it's something that's incredibly deep and intense. It's like a framework in which point-like particles are replaced by things. It's like insane. So I'm like, first of all, that's not even right. But what they mean, and I was like looking this up because I was trying to understand. So In Asia, it's basically called the red thread of fate, which is like a Chinese folklore where two people are destined to be true loves and they have this
Okay.
red cord that binds them together. So even if they're separated by time and distance or anything, they'll come back to one another. So the string theory they took is like a physics theory that they said is a different, it's like all, and then people say it like they're so right. But basically, the Chinese folklore is the theory that from birth, you have a soulmate that you have a red thread that's connected to that goes through space and time. No matter where you are, you're always kind of like connected and moving towards one another, which is
Huh.
interesting.
I feel like that could be crazy making.
Yo, exactly. People are like, Harry Styles has the other end of my thread. Matthew
Literally.
McConaughey is my other end, even if he's married.
I don't, yeah, I'm not of the belief that we have one soulmate,
Yeah.
though the part of the concept that's like you'll find each other. I feel like I kind of experienced with Sean where it's
Hmm.
like we were connected over 10 years ago. I always felt something like I always felt that pull, but it was like not the right time. I was scared of it, yada, yada, yada. And then when it was the right time and we were reconnected, it's like I realized that that was always there. So there could be that, but
100%. Yeah, it's kind of like, and I guess it's called invisible string theory. Maybe the TikTok world has it called invisible string theory, but yeah, it's kind of nice because it gives you hope because then you have hope that there's always going to be someone that you're connected to. So you're always like, yeah, I'm just kind of waiting for that to happen, which is really nice. It might allow you to relax into your life and be more present for what's there because you know it's always going to happen. Um,
I
and then it
think
could
people
always
are
be,
overthinkers anyway.
yeah,
They're gonna like
exactly.
the person comes in and they're like, is this the person? Like you kind of hyper fixate on like, is this them?
Mhm. 100%. Is this my I think what I don't like about it is like the binding nature of a cord that feels
Yeah.
like, I
Yeah.
don't like anything that's not freedom. And even in Liberated Love, the book, it's about you being sovereign and choosing with your free will this relationship,
Mhm.
not because of your codependent patterns or your need for safety or these unconscious fears that you have of being alone. It's like, how can you be in your fullness and your truth and yourself, your capital S self, and choose this person, choose this dynamic, choose this relationship? Um,
Yes.
but it is weird because it does, there is a weaving of soulmates and of people. We were weaving, you and I, throughout life,
Mhm.
like Justin, my ex, we were weaving throughout life. Um, and so when it is meant to be, it sort of drops in and happens. But it's kind of beautiful when you really think about it, the way that souls just kind of like work in and out of each other's life. And you can see looking back that it was meant to be. But yeah, the soulmate journey, the dating journey on TikTok is just, it's,
Dude.
it's psychotic.
And this is us as millennials where we're like, sorry, like that is not the actual like
Oh,
like
oh
it's
my
not
God.
accurate because it's not the
Yeah.
particle.
100%. I'm in the comments like, excuse me. Actually, this is not what you guys are talking about. That's Chinese folklore. Ladies, hold on.
You do
Please.
like a response video where you're like,
Yeah, honestly, I stitch it. I'm like, actually, string theory is.
um, but I loved having them both together because we get an interesting perspective from both of them and ones that you would not necessarily expect coming from the male masculine and the female feminine, where Kylie was actually the more avoidant one and like kind of not wanting to commit, was very like kind of giving Mark the runaround, but in a way that was also playing to his codependency and his anxious attachment and his tendency to always choose women who were like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So it was really interesting to have their relationship as an example for how the attachment styles dance together. We also talk about dating from wholeness. We talk about triggers in new relationships and how triggers come up and how that's actually pretty healthy and how you can work through it. We talk about the paradox of safety, which is basically that like the safer you are in relationship, the more triggers that come up, which happened to me. And I was like, what the fuck is happening? Like, is this then the wrong relationship? And I had to kind of look at that and reprogram that part of myself. We talk about like the internal deaths that happen through relationship. We talk about how to initiate a sacred pause, what that looks like. Um, we talk about how it really like takes a village. It's very hard to be in a romantic relationship if you don't have your friendships, your village around you supporting. Um, so yeah, this conversation I think is for anyone in a relationship, anyone who is desiring a romantic relationship, and honestly, like the concepts that they talk about in this book are applicable to friendships, to your family relationships. This is really across the board liberated love, not just romantic.
Yeah, I see certain friendships in my life as like I treat them with the same care as romantic relationships, where it's
Mhm.
like you and I are going to go through the process of clearing something that's crunchy, expressing our
Yep.
truth of how we feel. You know what I mean? And I yeah, it's like a handful of people where I'm like, yeah, we're going to go through it. We're going to feel the things, we're going to express the things, we're going to have this deep intimacy where we're both sovereign or we're both in a relationship that feels really true for us. And this relationship is a playground to express triggers, to work through triggers, to work through the kind of messiness of intimate relationships. So I really love that people are now really recognizing that a lot of the patterns that we can experience in romantic relationships, we can also experience in friendships. And if we can clear them from the friendship perspective, we're also going to clear them from the love perspective. That's something that I've also thought a lot about, where it's almost like my like just overflow of love in my life and the amount of friendships and people that I deeply love has been so nice because it's building and expanding my capacity for my love for my person. If I have a
Mhm.
lot of love in my life, I'm loving a lot of people, that energy and frequency of love I'm experiencing every single day with friends, with people that I am with. And then there's just no way that that's not going to be matched in romantic relationships with my partner because it's just the same type of frequency. So I think for a lot of people that want to have partnership with authenticity, with communication, with depth, with, you know, you feeling like you can be in the fullness of yourself and be yourself, practicing with friends that are safe, that you can commit to is a really beautiful practice.
And I also think it takes the pressure that we sometimes put on our person to be everything. It like
Yes.
takes that off, where you can lean on your friends for different things and lean on your partner for different things, and it truly becomes like a village effort.
100%. I think that's where I feel bad for our parents' generation because
Mm,
I think they were still working with that idea that your unit should be everything, your family unit should be everything. And I think what also happened is that, in the East, it was like multi generations would be in the household. The grandparents, the parents, the kids, they would have friends around. They would be much more communal. They'd be much more focused on the actual community that they could touch, feel, see on a daily basis. And that would be sort of
yep.
their hub. And in the West, we kind of came over, we became the nuclear family. We became like the 4-person, 2.5 kids household where every single thing had to happen within that family unit. And really, that unit cannot hold everything that someone needs in a lifetime dynamic, whether it's children, whether it's the mother, whether it's the father. And it just really became too much of a burden to bear for the husband to be everything for the wife to be everything for the husband. And I think that's a lot why relationships, not a lot, but I think that's an aspect of why certain relationships and the divorce rate is increased because we can't just hold that much for a person.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, we are truly changing our lineage forwards and
Yes.
backwards.
Hmm.
So no small feat.
That's
But
right, honey.
the book is Liberated Love, Release Codependent Patterns and Create the Love You Desire by Mark Groves and Kylie McBeath. Thank you both for joining us. We appreciate you. And thank you all for listening. I know this is going to be an episode that you will want to send to someone. It's a great one to send, maybe your partner, maybe the person you went on a date with last night. Who
Mm.
knows? But it'll start the conversation. So we appreciate you all listening.
Enjoy.
I have a shocking stat. Did you know that your scalp ages 6 times faster than your face? Okay, so you should treat your scalp like you treat your skin. And I've just gotten hip to this, and it's all because I found incredible products. Krista and I are obsessed at Act and Acre. This is a line of scalp products that treat common scalp conditions like hair thinning, dandruff, flakes, oily scalp. Um, it's incredible. The founder, Helen, is a trichologist, and this is the first scalp care brand. Trichology is a holistic approach to scalp and hair. Their process, mainly around cold pressing, which retains efficacy of ingredients. It uses 90% less energy to produce than traditional production methods. It's sustainable manufacturing, which is amazing, but the products really, really work. They really, really work. I wanted to share some products that I absolutely love. So, I am obsessed with the stem cell scalp serum. Yeah, baby. It's powered by 2% apple stem cells, and this scalp serum promotes thicker, fuller looking hair and supports scalp health in early stages of hair thinning. I am in my postpartum era. I have a new baby, and generally, a lot of women will experience hair thinning, hair loss, etc. But I have maintained a really thick, very healthy head of hair. I'm so thankful. And one of the reasons why is I've been using this scalp serum even before I had the baby. So, again, this is promoting thicker, fuller looking hair. It's going to support hair follicle health and it increases your scalp hydration. So, no longer do I have that dandruff, baby. I did have dandruff, but they have some incredible, incredible products for hair thinning, oily scalp, dry and itchy scalp, scalp buildup. So head on over to actandacre.com, baby. Head on over, ACT and ACRE, and treat your scalp. Your scalp has a microbiome just like your gut. So if it's unbalanced, it can just lead to dull and lifeless hair and many scalp conditions. So tackle it at its root. No pun intended. Actandacre.com. Use the code almost 30 for a discount. I'm super excited for y'all. Let me know which products you get and how you're liking them. Actandacre.com. Use the code almost 30. Okay, I'm in my era of building a capsule closet. I want pieces of clothing that I am going to have for a really long time. No more buying things that I'm going to throw out months later, right? So I wanted to introduce you, if you don't already know this brand, Jenny Kane, baby. The season is turning, and I am building pieces or my capsule collection for spring into summer. And I'm obsessed. I wanted to share a few pieces that I am loving. So I am so excited to just dance around this summer in my Cove dress. It comes in a bunch of different colors. I actually got it in the natural stripe and the navy. It's really, really cute. I'm going to wear it with some flats. You can dress it up, dress it down. It's just such a beautiful, easy dress. It's 100% cotton and it has this really cute V-neck. To pair with the Cove dress, I got the leather knot sandal. These are so cute, so comfortable. I am obsessed. I got them in the sand color, but they come in a bunch of different colors. Grab those. They are popular. Again, everything from Jenny Kane is of the best quality. So you're not going to get something that like will fall apart or anything like that. The quality is top notch. And lastly, I got the crochet raffia sun hat. I am a hat girly. They're my favorite in the summertime, springtime, when the sun is out and shining. I got to protect my skin, but also look cute. So I got that in black. Listen, y'all, Jenny Kane is incredible. It is just this like California cool brand. It's they make their staples just so classic, so stylish. They make getting dressed really easy. So think minimalist and effortless, but totally refined. They have luxe cashmere sweaters, iconic accessories. They have shoes, they have dresses, they have skirts, they have everything in between. I'm so excited for you to shop. Again, these are pieces that you're going to have for a long, long time. So find your new uniform at jennykane.com. Our listeners get 15% off your first order when you use the code almost 30 at checkout. That's 15% off your first order at jennykane.com, JENNIKAYNE.com. Promo code is almost 30. Let getting dressed be one less thing you have to worry about.
I am so honored, excited to be sitting with both of you, to have the gift of talking to Mark Groves and Kylie McBeath about their new book, Liberated love, which the world needs, I think, more than ever. And I really wanted to start, I was reading last night and I read this phrase to describe, I think, what the book is really pointing towards, which is breaking up with normal. Mm-hmm. And it just hit me, even though it's so simple the way you phrase that. I was like, wow, so many people are in relationships in their lives and thinking that the way in which they approach them, the way in which they relate, is really normal and honestly comfortable. And so I would love to start with where you both in your relationship 1.0 were coming from in terms of what your normal was.
Yeah, great question. It's so tricky, right? When you don't know a different way, when you don't know that there's a new template or a different relational dynamic that's possible for you, it's like normal is just, it's how it is. You know, even as new parents, it's like, well, this is just how it is. This is what you do. And it's like, well, no, actually we live in a pretty dysfunctional, sick society. So we shouldn't be doing things the way we've been doing things because they're not working. Same goes for our relationship dynamics. Most of us, myself included, the imprints in which I received from the modeling in my early childhood home, also my matrilineal line, was codependent. Didn't have a voice, didn't have boundaries, didn't know how to set limits, didn't have a healthy, clean connection to my anger. So I couldn't really advocate for myself in relationship 1.0 with Mark. So what that really looked like for me was I kind of took on the infantilized role of like, help me, I'm incompetent, I'm broken, I can't do this on my own, I can't survive on my own. And playing in that role allowed me to stay in my comfortable spot. And I knew how to relate to the world from a small broken place. And that's really sad to sit with and like, oh wow, what a not so great existence. But for me, if I was to step into my power, if I was to step into my voice, if I was to take up more space, not only would I be rocking the relational boat with Mark, but for me, I was rocking the intergenerational boat. Like, how will my relationship with my mother shift? How will my relationship within my family system, like all of these normals, how will it all shift? And, the body has a way of not letting you, or the body and the soul kind of connected in my mind. And how I write about it in the book is at some point, there's a breaking point where it's like this path, this dynamic, this way of being is no longer going to work. So it's life or death. Choose life or choose death. Which one are you going to choose? And that's kind of where I had to get to be able to step outside of that normal.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, the relationship 1.0, as Kylie was saying, was really for her centered around, I'm a problem. I can't figure this out. And for me, it was, well, listen, I got lots of solutions. And I like being needed. And I love that I already have a job where I get to do this and monetize my codependency. So why not be in a relationship that also really values what I have to bring to the world? And so there was a pursuing or a constant desire, to support her. What do you need to figure this out? Here I have some insights. And so eventually, on some level, this doesn't happen to I think it happens to everybody. They just are not paying attention, as Kylie said, to the somatic response, or they're calling it, I just have anxiety, or I just have whatever, name the symptom. But eventually you just get tired of being in an over-functioning or under-functioning role. And in order for the relationship itself to actually thrive, it requires this moving through old patterns, these survival strategies, and actually into adult behaviors, which I was 40 by the time it took a little while, but
never here. Too late. And I think most people are in that position where they are full-blown adults and thinking that they have to go back as far as you have to go back feels really daunting and uncomfortable. And two things I want to say is first, isn't it like, it's just crazy how we find each other, how
Right.
you found each other in this way where you are basically activating and or perfect puzzle pieces in the unhealthy way in that relationship 1.0. And thankfully, both were committed to looking at that and working through that apart, but then together. But I think a lot of people don't actually make the connection as to why they are attracting the type of person that either keeps them in those patterns or triggers them. So can we kind of unpack that a little bit so that people can understand exactly what's happening when either they're attracting the same type of person, the person that's unavailable, or the person who is not ready to commit, but kind of feigns that like interest, et cetera. What is actually happening there?
Do you want to hear? Yeah. For relationship patterns to keep repeating, this is what I find so fascinating about the unconscious mind is that even how it uses Tinder, it will still find the person who's a great match. Like, and this just tells you, I could give two people the same geolocation and the same dating app, and they'll end up with different people. And one will code one thing a red flag that another person codes a green flag. This isn't saying that the person who codes the green flag as codes the red flag as a green flag. This doesn't mean that they've got problems that need to be resolved. It's that somewhere along the line, they learned to make tolerances for things that they had to code as green flags to survive likely in their home. So, we unconsciously, and we talk about the relationship blueprint in the book, we unconsciously are drawn, and somehow, strangely, the humor of the universe, maybe, we're drawn to people that wound us in a similar way to the parent who wounded us the most. We often say, oh, you're attracted to your opposite sex parent. That's not true. You're attracted usually to someone who makes you feel a way or long for something that you didn't get from somebody. Do you have any other thoughts on that?
On that piece?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So when we're drawn to that unavailability, it's because we're being asked to resolve something. And Kylie and I are firm believers, and this is our experience both together, apart, and also working with so many people now, is that you're drawn to these people so you can actually finally resolve what is unresolved. You can finally heal what's unhealed. That's why you can look up, if you're a woman, you can look up your matrilineal line. If you're a man, you can look up your patrilineal line, and you'll see that these behaviors and patterns, they follow right down the family tree. And we think about it like, what a gift. And I know this can sound really hard, so I'm not minimizing the experience that people have, but what a gift that your lineage trusted you. What a gift that the relationships that you've had, and if you're in a relationship, that the relationship itself says, we have material to work with, and we want to work with this material. Turning to the frictions we have in our relationship from a place of reverence and that we're being informed is such a different way of seeing. I mean, gosh, that would have likely been a better class in school than, my health class. I went to a Catholic school. My health class was like, just don't have sex. Good luck.
Literally, it was 20 minutes.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, small presentation.
This class will be longer than your first experience.
Yeah. I relate so deeply in that I didn't realize that being in a co-creative, healthy relationship would bring up more in me and require me to look at more within my patterns and lineage, et cetera, than any relationship in my 20s. And at first I thought, well, that's an issue. This relationship is a problem because it's bringing stuff up for me. And I think that's, you both coined this as as a version or an iteration of like a disconnect. And I loved how you talk about the great disconnect, and we can get into that in a moment. But I didn't realize that that was a healthy quality in a relationship. And what I realized as well is that actually going in and being able to look at it was changing the way I related to my family system. So I was working on my relationship with how I grew up, et cetera, et cetera. But it was directly affecting my romantic relationship. And then by proxy, it was also resituating the family and how they related to me and how I related to them without actually doing a ton of work with them, if that makes sense. I was doing more of the work in the romantic relationship, but because I was seeing them differently, they were experiencing me differently. It's been subtle yet powerful and so beautiful, and just a byproduct of the work that I didn't expect. And so how can someone identify in a, let's say, romantic relationship that it is bringing up something to be looked at and worked on potentially together? Or is it something that is off in a bad way or a red flag that you should avoid? Because I think people doubt themselves a lot. They don't trust themselves to know. So how can people work through that?
Yeah, the differentiation between is this actually a misalignment or an off feeling for very specific reasons of it being a red flag, or is this actually something I need to look at? And I think that's a really beautiful question to start with, even just having the awareness and naming and identifying something feels off. Instead of gaslighting yourself, which is the way many of us have been raised, of just like minimizing and downplaying our intuition, our emotions. We like to talk about it in the book is like, what if we turn that inquiry into like the most sacred information you can receive about your relational dynamics? And so instead of minimizing it or downplaying it or labeling it as trauma, let's just work with reality. Something's coming up. Mm-hmm. We talk about that in the book. It's like, let's get right with reality. Something's here. And then from there, we can actually do something with it. We can name it. We can work it out with girlfriends. We can work it out in a therapeutic relationship. We can work it out with ourselves and get really curious of like, what's coming up for me? What's the story? And then we get to play with that a little bit and work it through and kind of live into the question of, is this right for me? Or is this something that is actually bringing me more life and more curiosity, more growth in the exploration of what's coming up for me? I think, we're quick to write things off too. It can be both like a both and of like, okay, sometimes we minimize that red flag feeling or that something's off feeling. And then other times we write it off too quickly. And I'm like, okay, how can we get curious about what is here for us? What is here for us to learn so that we can move through it in a good way in our relational dynamics?
Yeah, I think you have, people usually orient to that type of information in one of two ways. One is that they dismiss themselves. And so they're used to saying, oh, you know what? It's not a big deal. And we would just have to look at our relationship patterns to see that. Like, have I bypassed giant red flags or even small ones that led to really big ones early? And then you have the other people who code everything as a red flag. And so there's a lot of, one is a way that we create walls to block intimacy. And the one where we're collapsing and not taking in the information, that one we collapse ourselves. So we actually dismiss ourselves. You think about it, it's like, ultimately, how do people get most challenged in a relationship? Well, usually one person compromises themselves for a relationship and the other one compromises relationship for self. So as Kai was saying, like, if it's coming up, at least pursuing that inquiry. I'd say the hard lines are things that are deal breakers, and I think any type of abuse. And then you have classic deal breakers that people have, which we need to get clear on, things like smoking, not smoking, drinking, not smoking, drinking, drugs, not drugs, kids, not kids, like these sort of classic things. But it's actually, what's really interesting in the research is when people do speed dating and they write out all the list of the things they desire, and then they experience a connection they often throw out the list of the things they said they desired for connection. So it shows you when we're operating from a really scarce place that connection itself is scarce, but it's not. And it's scarce because connection to ourselves is actually what we're experiencing as scarce. So this becomes a reorientation where you are actually centered, not self-centered, but centered in your experience. And we're saying, hey, there's actually a really deep wisdom that exists within you. And Kylie and I, when we changed how we oriented to in relationship 1.0 before we broke up, what really catalyzed the breakup was this recognition that what's coming up for Kylie is coming up for me. I just don't know it yet. And it's kind of like Kylie talks about it like, you know, her body was the somatic canary in the coal mine, which I love that statement, because I thought instead of like Kylie's got a problem that needs to be resolved, it's actually Kylie's got a sense that needs to be brought forward. And I'm just, it takes a lot of humility to be in that space, but it took a lot, but it was like, oh, wait, I just don't see it. She sees it. Instead, I'm thinking she has a problem. There's a problem with the canary, which like, how many miners would die if we did that one?
Yeah. Yeah. The felt sense is something I think that not only has the potential to scare or overwhelm the person feeling it, but also the other person in relationship defaulting to what's wrong with you, or just feeling kind of threatened by that deep felt sense. And it's been part of, you know, my work and journey in my relationship to find my center in those moments where I'm feeling an overwhelming sense in my body. And it's been difficult for me to communicate through that. Kylie, how are you able to connect with that feeling in a way that you were able to communicate at least the beginnings of what you thought it was to Mark?
Not well. I'll just name that.
I was like, hey, is something coming up for you?
So intense.
She's like on the floor. You're like,
I'm
okay.
having an exorcism.
I'm like sick, energetically bleeding out, like barely had words, didn't like really just lost, right? Like in the intensity of what was happening for me. Cause it really did feel somatically like a life or death situation. Obviously it wasn't, but like that was the intensity in which I was working with in terms of stepping out of quote unquote normal. And so luckily I'm surrounded by a lot of really beautiful, empowered women who call me out on my shit. I'll just be honest. Like I'm so grateful for my sisterhood. If I can just like name that a dozen more times, for the importance of both men and women to find communities to hold you to your truth, to hold you to your potential. Like it's such a huge resource to have when we're stepping into liberated love or into any new dynamic, is that you have people in your corner who are willing to ask you hard questions and be there to support you when you answer them. But I had a girlfriend, Jordan, she was over at our house, and then she was like, how are you and Mark? And I was just like, well, I'm still struggling with
the old,
Yeah. And I was like, you know, I got really calm in my nervous system because it kind of felt like the point in time, like divinely, where it was time to name the truth, where it was like, I can't keep doing this. And, you know, she's like, Kai, I don't, you know, all that stuff's great. Cause I was talking about like, well, I'm struggling to go all in and I feel split. And like, there's this part of me that wants to stay. There's this part of me that wants to go. And I just don't know how to reconcile that split. I've tried everything. And she goes, Kai, like, I'm devoted to truth. Like, that's what I care about in this situation. So what is your truth right now? And I was like, oh, damn, like a dagger just right through the distortions, right through the wounding, right through all the stories. And I was like, the truth is I need to leave. And in that moment, I didn't bring that immediately forward to Mark, but I kind of just like hooked onto that question. What is true for me right now? And one of the biggest truths that kind of unraveled relationship 1.0 was my unreadiness to have a child. And Mark was very ready, very adamant, like, I want a child. I want a child. And that was something he was very clear on up front in his deal breakers. And he kept shifting the line for me. And that's a whole different story of topic of conversation. But it was like, okay, what is actually true is that I'm not ready and that I I don't actually see a ready right now because of where I'm at mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Like I knew, and I look at Jasper now, our son, and I'm like, wow, he was orchestrating so much deep work through this process of like, I can't come in to your family constellation when mom is disconnected from her body, her voice, her limits, her boundaries. Like, I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in repeating and recreating our intergenerational story. And I was like, hallelujah, thank God he wasn't. But it really was that catalyzed like what is true for me right now. And it was just like constant, just like inching towards that. And that truth actually softened my nervous system. It softened the intensity in which I was experiencing during relationship 1.0. And then, luckily I had and have a partner who's willing to sit with the truth and just not, bash me with it or, get upset. I mean, of course he has his feelings and being upset was one of them, but, he was ready for that too. He was ready for that level of integrity, self-integrity, and also integrity with self, soul, truth. So, the long and short of it.
Yeah. And Mark, how were you able to receive that in a way that I know you obviously felt your feels, but in a way that was really holding the truth that she was sharing? Because I think we can be so reactive and we can make it about us and how it's affecting us. So how did you kind of hold both your experience and hers?
Well, I think it came to a place where it was just so obvious, when she was talking about the deal breaker shifting, what was happening was that I had declared like, this is when I want kids. When do you want them? Does that work for you? I was very clear on that very early. And then I want to say about 3 years in, she was like, hey, can we change this? Like, that's feeling a little close. Can we adjust it? And I was like, all right, well, let me just sit with that. Okay. Yeah. It felt okay for me. It was like a year, I think she said. And then she came back again and shifted it. And I was like, no. Like there's something more going on. And now in hindsight, I can see that when people shift deal breakers, often what they're doing is trying to shift the relationship. They just don't want to be the one who confronts it. So they're like, hey, if I shift this deal breaker, will you call me out? Will you stand in what is integrity? Will you stand in what you say you desire? I want to say, and I'm going to genderize here, which is that I think often that test comes from the woman to the man, and speak heteronormatively. And I mean that because I remember reading this book called No More Mr. Nice Guy by Robert Glover. And he said, if you don't stand up to her, she won't believe you'll stand up for her. And that resonated a lot for me as the person who tends to, we're talking about Kylie's experience of feeling broken. I tended to collapse. Like I would collapse myself, my boundaries, what I desired, compromise it, all under the idea that it was for the better of the relationship. But then I was experiencing self-erasure. I didn't exist in dynamics, but the dynamic existed. Thank the Lord, I got to keep the relationship, even though I didn't get to keep myself. And so there was this really beautiful expansion of the space I was taking up. This was happening through my work. This was happening, it demanded that I had a more solid voice, that I stood more in what was true for me. And so as I was healing that, I was recognizing that this thing mattered to me so much, like creating the life I wanted to create and the relationship I wanted to create. And I knew I was capable of doing that I finally got to a place where I was like, no more. I remember saying to Kylie in the kitchen, I just looked at her and I was like, look, like I want to create a life. I want to create one with you. I want to have kids. I want to do that with you. But if you don't want that, I love you and you're free to go. And that was just a really powerful experience for both of us. One, because I'd been somewhat on the other side of that sentence when I was 27. And I desperately wished someone had said that to me, that I love you, even though this relationship can't go forward, that your path actually is so important and my path is so important. And if your path doesn't align with my path, then it's not my path. And I think that is something that really solidified in our relationship 1.0, which is really how we live to 2.0, is that we honor each other's path as being divine and each other's path. And that really through dialogue and conversation and aligning dreams and supporting one another, those paths walk alongside. Does that mean that will always be true? We can't predict the future, but I would say it's a lot more likely when you operate with that level of intention and reverence for the other person's individuality and expression.
I don't know about you, but I put my hair through the ringer throughout the years, like whether it's heat on my hair, like curling irons and straighteners, just oof, so bad without protecting it, just over blow drying, washing it too much, etc. So I'm really excited about Lola V. This is an award-winning hair care line founded by the fabulous Jennifer Aniston. Do you know her? You know, the hair so iconic, it needs no introduction. um, so it's really crucial to have products that not only repair the look of the damage, whether it's from coloring, heat styling, stress, aging, but also shield your locks from future harm. I have been using the glossing detangler, y'all. I have this thing where if I wear a beanie or a hat or wear my hair down and walk around, caring for a baby, I get mats in my hair. It's crazy. But the glossing detangler, I'll spray it in after I take a shower. I'll either blow dry or let it air dry. No knots, no nothing. It's amazing. I also love the Perfecting leave-in conditioner. I'm someone who only washes my hair once or twice a week, and this has been a game changer. My hair's best friend, to be honest. I notice my hair is just softer, bouncier, healthier looking, shinier. It's the best. So check out Lola V. I'm so excited for you. Here's a treat for you, our listener. You get an exclusive 15% off your entire order at lolav.com. Just use the code A30POD, A30POD at checkout. I mean, if you're taking hair care advice, why not listen to the woman who introduced us to the Rachel cut? And then just recently reintroduced us. Hello, for full circle moment. Love her. So lolav.com, LOLAVIE.com. Use the code A30POD for 15% off your entire order. Okay. Finding the perfect t-shirt has been, one of the biggest challenges for me in a fashion sense. But I found a t-shirt I love. It is so soft, very versatile, and I'm really excited to share it with you. So I'm wearing the boyfriend t-shirt from Skims. Yo, it is so flattering. I love it. I'm kind of I have that tomboy in me. So what I'll do is sometimes I'll just wear it with some biker shorts and some sneaks, little baseball cap. So cute. I can also tuck it into jeans with a belt. Darling. It is so freaking comfortable. I cannot tell you the feel of this material. I'm obsessed. I also got the Fits Everybody t-shirt in black. This is a classic. You can put this under a blazer. You can wear this solo with a high-waisted jean short. You can wear this, you can dress it up and dress it down. It is so nice. Fits like anybody. It's unbelievable. Why I love Skims. So they have sizes ranging from extra, extra small to 4X. So truly, you will find your size at skims.com. But I love that they are just innovating styles, right? Just thinking of the body and what looks best on the body. The Fits Everybody collection is one that I go back to all the time because I know that it's going to conform to my body shape and just make it look banging. So shop the Skims t-shirt shop at skims.com, now available again in sizes extra, extra small to 4X. And if you haven't yet, be sure to let them know that we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. It means so much to us. Enjoy your Skims.
Yeah, both beautifully said. And it reminds me so much that we are so, because in these moments I can imagine, there was many moments of pain and death and grieving and just how much we walk around trying to protect ourselves from that all the time, but we're doing so at the expense of who we really are and how we really feel and what we really desire. And yeah, I definitely think that we all whether we consciously realize it or not, hit a point where it's like, oh, we can't protect ourselves from that anymore. I was actually having a conversation with my brother last night, who's 28, and just everywhere he turns, trying to protect himself from pain, and in relationships specifically, but also just in general. And I'm like, ooh, I don't think me saying what I'm witnessing is going to really hit it home for you in this moment. I don't know if you're ready to hear it, but it is, I think, a very common human experience to try to avoid pain, especially in relationship. But I also wanted to just touch on what you said about just telling her, you can go. I love you, but you can go, and that really, to me, encompasses that idea of liberated love, where you are in an interdependency and this co-creative relationship, and there is, like you said, a reverence and just an honoring of the individual path that each other is on. And so I'm curious, going from what sounds like on both sides in different ways, codependency. What did we can talk about what this means, the sacred pause that you took, break up for, in layman's terms, how did that allow you to become aware and also a bit more self-honoring in that process, so that you can go in to the relationship 2.0 in a much healthier way? I guess, what did that sacred pause look like for each of you? Because a lot of people are scared to take a break because they're scared of what that means. They're scared and don't trust themselves to come back to do the work, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So valid. It's scary. It's terrifying because you don't know what's on the other side, right? And that's that unknown that we're hesitant to move towards in our lives in many areas, right? That's why we stay in that normal, quote unquote. The sacred pause was deeply sacred and deeply discomforting in so many ways. When Mark and I ended relationship 1.0, Lindsey, I was so angry. I didn't know where the anger was coming from, but it was like somatically, my body had started to move out of freeze, where I had felt frozen for so long and disconnected and living from the neck up, that throughout the somatic work I was doing, which was actually, I started that at the end of relationship 1.0 because I was like, something has to shift. I started in the safety of that relationship with my somatic therapist, started to gain more access to my anger. And when our relationship 1.0 ruptured, it like came flooding through. And I just I was angry at the world. I was angry at everything. It was just like, putting on glasses and like, everything's just pissing me off. Like I started to see all the invisible ways that love wasn't able to flow. All the invisible ways that I had been limited internally and externally from stepping forward into relationship, from stepping forward into creating a family. And I was mad. I remember talking to one of my mentors and being like, why can't I just have the husband and the child? Like, why can't this just be easy? And she said to me, she's like, you didn't sign up for that. Like, you didn't sign up for normal, And I was like, oh, damn, because the human parts of me were like, I just want it. I just want that. And then my soul's like, yeah, you can have that and it's going to look better. Trust us. Like, you got to go through this descent process and do your work. And so for me, that sacred pause was most of it was around actually coming back into my own center, actually regaining access to my own felt sense of limits, of boundaries, of honoring my womb, of honoring my body. And where that really kind of started to take shape and form of like what that needed to look like for me was in a conversation with Mark Wolin. I'm not sure if you've had him on your podcast. No, but he's the author of It Didn't Start With You and Family Constellation and looking up. I know you guys have had conversations around family constellation because I've listened to them. But I was on a phone call with him and, before the phone call, just to be honest, it's like, I was like, I'm good. I've got this. Like, I'm doing good work. I'm starting to understand how patriarchy and intergenerational ancestral karmic patterns have been showing up and blocking me. But then I get on the call with him and he's like, so tell me a little bit about your birth and the first, couple months and years of your life. And so I did. And he's like, okay, well, essentially what's been going on for you in your relationship dynamics is you have been recreating the imprints you have with your mother with all the men in your life. And I was like, okay, awesome. Tell me more about that. And he's like, essentially, when you were a young child, because it wasn't safer, there was inconsistent, it was an inconsistent environment. There was not a lot of regulation. My mom's velocity was, 7,000 miles per hour. And bless her, she had 4 children dealing with a lot. But I felt in that environment really unsafe internally. And so the mechanism is like, as a young baby child, I'm going to leave my center. I'm going to psychically orient my consciousness around mother, around primary caregiver, and tune into what she needs or what I need to do to make sure she's okay so that I'm okay. And that's kind of like that imprint that kind of like set the stage for codependency to just flourish in my young adulthood and until I was 30 and this rupture happened. And essentially, it's that blueprint, leave your center, orient around another, try to intuit their needs, make them feel good so that you can keep them close, all at the expense of your own self. So I took that pattern, kind of played it out and got sick of it with Mark, of course. And he basically said, like, until you actually remove men from your life for a very specific amount of time with a very clear intention, you will continue to recreate this pattern. You need to do your mother work. And I was like, oh, okay, awesome. So he was like, you need to actually create a container where you remove men because you're sourcing so much safety and security from them through this original imprint. But you actually need to go back and heal the original imprint with mother through your own mother work. And that didn't have to be physical like you were discussing earlier. And I think this is one of the really cool parts about healing is, we're a part of a collective field. And so if we're doing this work, even if we're doing it internally or even on multidimensionally, it is rippling out. It's changing every single dynamic in our lives. Yes. And so I entered into a no man diet container with Kendra Kunov, and we talk about it in the book. But essentially it was 12 weeks, no men, a no man diet. No sexting, not that I was big into that at that time. Anyways, I was like, I'm a mess. But like, no scrolling social media, no going on dates, no seeking from men, and actually start to heal your relationships with women.
And all the little ways.
Oh gosh, it was so little and so.
Like what?
Oh my gosh. I remember I was at a spin class.
Because I'm sure I did it.
I was in a spin class and it was so trippy. I was like sitting there and the instructor was hot. Like, I'll just be honest. He was hot and I really wanted his validation or I really wanted that hit.
Front row, baby.
Right?
Front row to spin class. That's all you'll see.
And I remember naming that and being like, wow, that is so deep, Kai. Who am I without male validation? Who am I without the male gaze? Who am I without men? I don't even know who I am.
Sure.
It was a trip. And I was like, this stuff runs so deep. And when I actually entered that container, my nervous system shot up again. It was like a life or death situation. I don't know who I am without men. I'm not going to be able to survive this. I'm not going to be able to do this. It was 12 weeks, Lindsey, 12 weeks of my life. Wow. And it just somatically felt that intense because those patterns are that old that they do feel that intense, or they did feel that intense for me. So I entered that container and reworked so much in my nervous system and started to learn how to source safety and security, both internally and also in relation to other women, in relation to the earth, in relation to my own womb, in relation to my own instinct and intuition in ways that I had never really leaned on. And so that allowed me to enter relationship 2.0 really solid, just straight up. I was solid. I felt my whole body. And I remember this vividly of the energy actually starting to move back down into my feet. It was the first time in my life I could feel my feet on the ground. And any time in any relational dynamic after being able to feel that sense of my feet are on the ground, I'm here. any dynamic, relational or otherwise, my energy started to rise again. I was like, oh, this is a huge sign that I'm starting to leave myself, or I'm starting to disconnect or disassociate or enter into old patterns. And so I really leaned on my body and the tracking of my own nervous system to support me, to stay grounded, to stay anchored, to stay centered, as I kind of reworked and rewired my whole system to orient to the world differently.
Yeah. And I'm glad you described that, because I'm not sure if people understand that that's happening a lot, where they are leaving their center, they're leaving their body in a sense, I think, and how that could be compromising connection, and also like creating a lot of distortion in who you're attracted to and in relationship with. And Mark, how I can imagine, this is like the cartoon version of this, but I can imagine her coming in, as Kylie 2.0, and you're just like, whoa, because of the internal that's changed. I can imagine the reverberation of both physically, emotionally, that like energetic field around her must have felt different. But what was your experience?
Yeah, it was completely different. It was completely different. I mean, to prepare us even actually for that moment, what was interesting about my own experience of relationship is that since I had been betrayed when I was in my early 20s, I'd really avoided women, to be fair. Like I dated women, but I mean like women who called me forth. And that showed up as me dating unavailable people, dating people freshly out of relationships. It also led me to when a woman truly wanted to choose me or love me, I ran. I ghosted, I disappeared, the connection wasn't good, all the things. And all those are true, because I did need to get to the place of getting cosmically slapped. And when Kylie and I broke up, the relationship was over for me. Like I had no interest in going back. The pattern was exhausting. I had finally chosen myself. I sort of like stepped fully into my own self, and really stepping into I had trust and trust in me. And what was interesting, and I've shared this with people recently, this exploration of like, if you don't have access to like a real no, then your yes is actually compromised. Like if you can't say no in relationship to, and this is why things like a no man diet, or just not interacting with people, whoever you're drawn towards, if you're, you're really starting to learn that you can start to trust yourself in connection to chemistry. Like you're really taking charge of the charge. And if chemistry draws you to people who are unhealthy, then it's not chemistry. It's not. And so calm and discernment and trust and reliability become real hot when we are reliable, when we trust ourselves. We don't want to be with people who are not that. And so I started to really be in that feeling of like, wow, I finally, like it came to me or the relationship, and I chose me and I chose the relationship, in that we together changed or created a story that love can still exist when a container changes. That was, I would imagine, very healing to our whole lineages, and when we were apart, that I was just thinking like, look, like I'm not worried about meeting somebody. For me, it was like, all I need to do is meet somebody who is open to growth, has humility, is curious, and we have similar aligned values. And Kylie happened to send me a message and was like, hey, do you want to, I think it was like, want to have coffee? I want to chat with you. And this was after, I want to say 8 months, 10 months. And she came over, and she was completely different. I mean, she was a woman. She was everything I always wanted, but didn't want.
Yes.
And
did it scare you at first? Where you're like, oh shit, or you were ready? Or you?
It was a bit of both, but it was like kind of hot scared, I was like,
totally.
She's so powerful. Good Lord. I think what's interesting too is like, we think about power dynamics in relationship when we operate from the belief that power is finite. when we operate from the place, like if I have power, they don't. But that's actually what we see through the experience of this relationship. But just in general, working with people is like, if Kylie becomes more powerful, the container becomes more powerful, I become more powerful. Like there's no trade. And yeah, when she walked in, she was like, had a swagger to her, and she was like, I'm interested.
It's true, Kylie.
Yeah, she did. She was like, I'm interested in exploring this again. And I'm ready to have kids. And I'm ready to choose this relationship fully. And are you interested? Essentially. And I was like, yeah.
Give me 5 minutes. I gotta think about this.
Exactly. And so I was like, I think I am. Like, yeah. And we created a dating container. I think for people who are listening, who are in a relationship, who the idea of a sacred pause is terrifying, because I can understand that. This isn't about going no contact if you have kids or being in a relationship and all of a sudden being like, I'm moving out. It's more about actually setting the energetic container so that the people in the relationship can explore how they relate to one another and also their own power, their own path, their own everything. A couple can read the book together, and actually that's, obviously the greatest context. All of a sudden you tell your partner, like, we're doing a container. They're like, oh, can I have some context? So for people that starts to be scary, this isn't about disconnecting from and breaking up. It's about, let's get clear on what the truth is in our relationship and what we actually want to create. And it creates the safety to explore that. But what really it's saying is there's a dedication to truth now. And also there's a dedication to the true path this relationship needs to bring forward. And Kylie and I in our container coming back together, that was it, is like, is this relationship in service of both of our futures and both of our beings? And it's so normal for me to be like, oh, I'm all in. Like the moment, we went on a first date, my brain, I'm the woman. My brain's thinking about the wedding, the thing. Yeah. And Kai is different than that. And so in our container, what I noticed was I was starting to slip into, then this must be the future. And I would start to realize also through her feedback, like, this isn't actually a good fit for me yet. Like, is this right for me? I think for people who are more anxiously attached or the pursuer or however they identify people pleasing, codependency, it's like there's not a discernment of, is this good for me? And that goes back to because I now had access to my no, I knew that my yes was actually authentic. So now I was sitting, is this a yes or a no? I wasn't ready to make that choice. And formally that would have been very anxiety inducing for me. But there was actually being able to hold the capacity for the ambivalence or the not sure yet, but we have a 3-month container that we're going to figure this out in. And if we get to the end of this 3-month dating container and it's a no, and we can handle that.
Yeah. And you call it in the book, liberation through limitation, which I really love. I think, words are so powerful. And so instead of calling it a breakup or a break or whatever it is, sacred pause, that liberation through limitation is, I think, really powerful when you're bringing this to a conversation with a partner. And I'm kind of feeling into some thoughts that the audience might have around, well, what if one person is perceiving that they will do more of the work than the other person? And this is, what did you call it? Genderizing?
I made that word up.
I like that. Genderizing.
Say it a lot.
Genderizing. Where, I don't know if my boyfriend's going to do the work like I'm going to do the work, or, what that looks like, or vice versa. I guess, and I know this is getting into the nitty gritty of how you kind of go off into this sacred pause, but it's like, how do you ensure, can you ensure that you are both committed to doing that work and resourced? Because I think in my experience, I feel like I've been very resourced with that stuff. I do think my husband seeks it out, and I feel very lucky in that way. But I think generally men aren't as resourced, unless you're following Mark Groves, with that type of support and various paths that they can take to do this healing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's such an important, as I would imagine if we're talking with men and women in relationship, but this dynamic will show up between all gender combinations.
Yes.
But just through socialization, you'll see the woman more in the space of trying to do more of the work. Harriet Lerner speaks about how the reason that women do more relational, emotional learning is because every subordinate group needs to learn the needs and nuances of the dominant group purely for survival. So women need to be emotionally fluent and agile, because if they're not, they can die at the hands of an angry, emotionally erratic man. So I think that at least gives us context as to why generally women are a much more accurate barometer to the health of the relationship. They also have lower tolerance for relational, I guess, imbalance or challenges. And so like a man will be like, wait, what? What's going on? I'm fine with the way things are.
Totally. Right.
But, if one person's not, that's important. And, we really have the same conversations over and over again because we never end up resolved. We never end up getting to the baseline underlying need that is there, which is like, am I important? Can you take the time to understand me? We think it's about the wet towel on the bed, but it's not about the wet towel on the bed.
Yes.
It's about, you don't hear me. And so I think when we get to this place of the fear that we're going to do more work, that needs to be actually laid at the forefront of the relationship. That's again, more material to work with. And then we're talking about men here, if the man can access, that's true that you have done that. That's true that you've done more of the emotional lifting. For a lot of men, we don't have the language to put to our body's felt sense. So I think there's also a lot of compassion that needs to be had to create the space for the language, because often we'll get the language wrong and it'll cause our partner to react. And so I always think like whatever age a man is, if it's his first foray journey into emotional language, he has that many years behind. And that's not an excuse. That's just context. But there does need to be a bar that's held for like, what are we both committed to? What I would see a lot working with a couple, let's say, who was processing infidelity, is that both were not there to resolve the relationship. Often the person who had the infidelity would be still having the infidelity or still, and it's like, no, it's 100, like, are you in? Are you not? This isn't saying if you're in, it means we're going to stay together. It means, are we in and exploring what is really true and actually letting the old relationship, I mean, it has to end. It has to end, not literally, but it has to end metaphorically, because both the people who held that relationship together, and again, metaphorically, have to die. Because, I mean, I think this goes to our culture's fear of death in general, is that we don't know how to be with emotions like grief and loss. And because of that, we can't even let patterns within ourselves that are destructive or unhealthy in relationship die. And, it is actually a strange paradox that the capacity you have to love anybody will always be walked alongside the capacity for the loss of them. Because that's really what you're saying is, if I'm going to go deeper with you, I'm already preparing myself that one day I will lose you. And that is a fact. And so what happens if we lived in love from that place? I think what's possible is just so different. So I think that was a long way around the barn to answer your question, which is all of that matters and all of it's true. And in the context of the woman, she needs to be acknowledged for that fear. Like, what would it mean you maybe not carrying it? What would it look like for you, for me to carry some of it? How has that felt? Because my guess is that you've been doing that your whole life, not just with your partner. And so what's really being asked to heal is this generational lifetime pain of really carrying all the buckets for the whole village, of carrying, all the emotion for your family. And to me, I'm like, oh, what a beautiful thing for a relationship. And the man might be like, well, that's not my problem. Yeah, but it is your privilege. It's your privilege that she trusts you with this, that the relationship is like, we need to resolve this. Oh, and then like, what can that person, and you might identify as that person, whoever's listening, like what is possible for you when your energy is not directed, and part of it is also our own containment, which means I have to stop myself from the overgiving, the overdoing, which is really my martyrdom too. So we have to, the follow-up question always to someone doing that is, what is the benefit that you get? Which we don't like that one generally.
Yeah. Thank you for taking that round the barn way, because I think it's so beautifully said. And I think that we almost minimize and or go straight to, well, I must be overreacting because I'm feeling so intensely about this. And if we're talking about what you just described, like the woman or the more feminine feeling, like, why am I so passionate about this? Why does this matter so much? Maybe I'm too much. Right. Maybe, and realizing that it is not just this moment. It is truly, you are healing a generational pattern. You are healing something that is so deep and so intertwined in your being and your family. The way you said that just hit me, where I was like, oh, wow. The moments where I felt crazy were because it was so deep and so important, and it's almost like this wild part of, at least in my experience, like this wild part of me that is trying to get the attention of the other and also of myself. It's like my soul being like, yo, absolutely like no more. We must change this. And I just love that. I'm going to read just a little excerpt from the book, because you were working with a client and your question was just like pretty simple. Like, do you want a great relationship? She's like, yeah, obviously, like that's why I'm here, which I think most people would agree. Like, yeah, I want a great relationship. Duh. Like that's my dream. And you said, then you have to get rid, and Mark, this is you, I believe. Yeah, this is Mark. Then you have to get tired of your old way of doing things. You have to want the amazing relationship more than you're afraid of letting go of what's familiar. You have to be willing to let your old relationship die so a new one can be born. You have to be willing to create new patterns and take responsibility for your side of the street. You have to be willing to explore, grow, and learn from one another and participate in each other's healing. You have to be willing to dance in the unfamiliar, and you have to be truly committed to that vision. Great relationships don't just happen, we create them. I thought that was so powerful, because I think for me, the key word is willing, and I think there can be a really complicated self-imposed power struggle where you're like, well, they should be doing this and fixing this and changing this about them. And there's, I think, so much more power, self-empowerment, and empowering the relationship to be able to tap into our own will to heal, to deeply connect, to be vulnerable. And yeah, that just really, really hit me. And it's also just a glaring truth when you are approaching this work. Are you willing? Are you willing to let go of the old way of doing things? Are you ready? Are you willing to let that die in order to really experience something new and potentially better than you could ever imagine? I wanted to round out our conversation just bringing us to the present moment, because I think a lot of people can look at you both and be like, well, they have it all figured out, and
read our book.
They're married, see. They have a kid, they have a book together. Like they must just they've arrived. And, you know, obviously we know that is all true. And it is what I've realized. Marriage is not this like destination. This relationship that we dream of is not the destination. And I really appreciate that now that I'm in it and aware of it. But I guess, can you bring us into the intimacy of your relationship now with a child, which adds a whole other layer to the experience, a beautiful layer, but just calls you even deeper into your own healing together and individually. What does relationship 2.0 look like in reality?
Ooh. Let me clear my throat for that one. Yeah, I mean, relationship 2.0 before child and after child is a very different relationship 2.0. I'll just name that. But the foundation, I always say this to Mark, the foundation in which we stand on is so solid. Like, it's so solid that I don't fear that Mark's just going to eject or that, you know, I'm going to be left alone. Like, there's not those like really old fears that exist in my system. And I know because of how we've historically and also currently relate to quote unquote triggers or things that we're working through, that there's a lot of safety in our collective system. And so that safety really allows for a lot of crunchy bits, especially postpartum, to come to the surface and continue to be worked on. And there's a lot to be worked on. Like, I'm sure I'm not going to jump into your field, but
I'll just say yes.
but it's just offering another level and layer of what it means to, treat each other and self with respect, reverence, and get even better at communicating. Like, wow. When you're, I wouldn't say under-resourced, because I think Mark and I are resourced, but, you know, I think we're parenting in insane times. I don't think that, I really do. I think it's insane that we put all this pressure on two people to raise a child. And sometimes, you know, if you're a single mom, you're listening to this, it's insane for even to think about a single mom having to raise a child or a single dad. Yeah. And I just want to name that because it's like, we're entering a new frontier in a relationship, and we're trying to ask, like, how do we resource self, like mother, so that mother can mother the baby? How do we resource father? And that, you know, a big piece of that being like, men need other men to support them during this time. So one of the questions we're kind of living into currently in our relationship and, you know, have our own frictions around is like, how do we increase the capacity of this family system so we can show up well, so we can actually thrive instead of just survive? Because to be honest with you, there are moments in the last 11 months where it's pure survival. It's like, wow, we're just surviving this because it's such an intense time, especially with how we're choosing to raise our child. It requires a lot from both of us. And I think one of the biggest sticky points and things we're still working through, and Mark, I'll let you kind of expand on this, is getting into right relationship with needs. Like right order, right needs, like how do Mark's needs interact with my needs, interact with Jasper's needs, so that we can continue to create a harmonious field for us to flourish.
Yes.
Yeah. I think there's such a difference too of like relational orientation to one another pre-child versus post-child, as Kai is saying, which is a beautiful change. I definitely understand why people never have kids, because, you know, you're like, we'll go on vacation whenever we want. You don't have to worry about, you're not thinking about everything. I did realize once I became a father that I had far more time than I thought I had.
Yes.
That's for sure. Like, I mean, beautifully, I remember I interviewed Stan Tech, and who wrote a book, co-authored a book called Baby Balm. And it's about this idea of like, baby's not, they're a balm to a family, but the balm, like that sort of play on words. And something that he said to me that was just so beautiful, which just was like the parenting sort of extrapolation of liberated love, is he said, everything that comes up for you as parents is things that just hadn't come up and been resolved as a couple. And, you know, when I interviewed him pre having a kid. He said that the reason most couples fail is because they fail to make agreements at the beginning and get clear on their agreements. And I think what is really interesting about having a kid is that you go from going from 2 people to 3, and not 3 in the fun way, 3 in the hard way. And I remember Kai saying that, or we were talking about this, just like that transition to 3 is actually also why parents get divorced, because they don't know how to stay a unit. And so it's like the couple always has to actually stay the primary, and the child is actually not the primary, the partner is. Not to say that the child isn't important and all those things, but that like decisions and everything. And I think one thing as a father is that I have to, and I know you and I, Lindsey, talked a bit about this offline, but it was like, as a father, I've really had to be with like not feeling prioritized or not. And I get it's all a season, but that I can bring these things to the relationship so they can be interacted with and met, because it is obviously important to orient the family system around the child and the mother's needs, especially postpartum. And then what? How do we transition to the place where, like, you know, the father and the mother both feel centered in the relationship? And really, that's what teaches the child the same thing. So these are all things we're like exploring, discussing, dancing with. And I think for people listening, it's like, no matter where you're at, just take it as an adventure. Like, it can be an adventure. You know, I think in our culture, everything has to be positive. And if you have sad feelings, there's something wrong with you. It's like, no, this is just part of the human experience. And I just think we live in such an over-medicated culture that we're missing all these canaries. You know, we're missing all these opportunities. And one thing I wanted to say to what you said previously is that, like, when you ask someone if they want to do something, you have to be willing to hear no. You know, do they want to work on it? No. Do they want what you want? No. And then I think the real work is like, can we change our relationship to no, instead of trying to force someone to get into a yes? It's like, wow, like, just let them be there, no matter the response. I'd rather spend my life, you know, moving forward from that than spend my life convincing someone of a yes. And, you know, that's certainly, we want to teach our child to be brought fully to life, to like that to be in reverence and relationship with his mother is to love the totality of her, and that we repair in front of him. That's something that I think is so important, that he sees. You know, sometimes we get into little conflicts in front of him, but it's so important that we repair. I think so often the repair happens behind closed doors. And so kids don't learn that. And it's, I mean, now more than ever, how to be in difference is so important.
Yeah, that was my experience, where I never saw my parents resolve. And I don't really know if they actually did behind closed doors. It just kind of fizzled. And I then, in relationship with Sean, who's like very comfortable bringing things to the table and very comfortable with like healthy conflict. And I was like, you know, that really activated me. And I really had to learn, how to communicate how I was feeling. But I've been saying this to anyone that asks, but it's like, parenthood is the most beautiful, heart opening thing ever. And it's the most challenging, heartbreaking thing ever, you know, at the same time. And I don't mean heartbreaking in like a, you know, negative way. It's just, your relationship to death and life becomes so in your face and palpable all the time. And so I don't know. I haven't been able to, I don't know if I'll ever master it, but or if it'll ever become easy, but I've had to learn to live alongside that new reality and what that looks like between me and my husband too. Because I think, we can go on about this forever, but I think like that mama bear and papa bear thing happens in different ways at different times, and being able to meet each other when, that part of you is activated has been a very interesting experience. But yeah, I think I'm just so glad you both shared here today and in the book your personal story, because I think people can take in a lot of quotes and inspiring things online and all the things, and it's wonderful. But to hear your past and live process is so inspiring. And to know that it's not perfect, to know that like you are literally living questions right now and honoring the process of what is, even though you don't know necessarily how long a process is going to be or where it's going to go. I think that is the great joy and thrill of being in a relationship that I think a lot of people are afraid of. So I'm really excited for people to hear this conversation. I'm so thrilled for them to read the book, Liberated Love, which is out, I believe, today, when this episode comes out. But Liberated Love, release codependent patterns and create the love you desire. So powerfully too. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having us. We're so grateful, and for everyone listening to trade their time for us. That means so much.
Thanks so much.
We appreciate you.
Appreciate you too.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Mark and Kylie. We appreciate you. The book is Liberated Love, out now. Release codependent patterns and create the love you desire. This is going to be one that you want to maybe do a little book club with. I think whether it's with friends or maybe your partner, I think it's a great one.
Yeah. I would also send this to a friend. This is such a great episode to have in conversation with your friends. How can you maybe apply some of these principles in your friendships and practice? We also had Mark on the podcast a few years ago. So if you search Mark Groves Almost 30, you can find that episode on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for writing a review and subscribing to Almost 30. It means so much over the years that you guys have done this. It's just such a nice thing. Morning Microdose is all for you. It's no ads. It is our top hits of Almost 30 you can listen to every single day. There's so many episodes of Morning Microdose that people send me all the time that they love. And then Almost 30 Podcast on TikTok and Instagram. You can find me on Instagram at It's Krista.
And I'm at Lindsey Simsick. We appreciate you all, and we will see you on the next episode.
We love you guys. Bye.